When I bought my cabin by Silver Pine Lake, I thought I was signing up for peace and sunsets, not neighborhood drama with a woman who somehow weaponized a clipboard. The property was simple: a small A-frame, quiet cove, a short stretch of lakefront perfect for a dock and me. That's all I needed. Then Karen moved in next door. Her house was twice as big, 3 times as loud, and came with a husband who always seemed to be mysteriously out of town. The first time she introduced herself, she said, "We try to keep things orderly here, as if the forest needed an HOA. I laughed, thinking it was a joke. It wasn't. Within a week, I got a typed note taped to my mailbox. Reminder: all waterfront decor must match community standards. It was signed, Silver Pine Lakeside Preservation Committee, which, as I soon learned, was code for Karen and her printer. The committee didn't actually exist. She just made it up to sound official. And the best part? She didn't even own the lakefront. She had a view of it. My property line, confirmed by county maps, ran all the way down to the water's edge, while hers stopped a good 20 feet back. Still, that didn't stop her from treating my shoreline like her turf. At first, I tried to be neighborly. When she complained that my old dock looked unsafe, I told her I'd replace it eventually. When she told her landscapers to trim the trees on my side for aesthetic continuity, I reminded her that continuity wasn't part of my vocabulary or her jurisdiction. But one Saturday, I came home to find a brand new fence stretching straight down to the lake, cutting directly across my beach, my section of shoreline gone. I dropped my grocery bags and stared. There it stood, a 6-foot cedar monstrosity with a shiny private property, no trespassing sign nailed to the middle, complete with a lock on the gate. Karen appeared on her deck, sipping a glass of wine like a villain in a suburban thriller. "Hi, neighbor," she called. "I took the liberty of securing the area. It's technically part of the shared view zone." "The what?" I said. "The shared view zone. I'm filing it with the county soon, but for now it's better this way. Keeps things organized." I blinked. "You fenced my property." She smiled that tight, terrifying smile only people who think they're invincible wear. "If you think of it as our property, it's less upsetting." That was the moment I knew 2 things. 1, this woman had no concept of boundaries, literal or personal, and 2, I was going to need to outsmart her. I called the county first thing Monday. The clerk, an older guy named Dale, remembered my parcel. "Yeah," he said, chuckling. "Yours goes right down to the lake. Nobody shares that shore but you." I explained the fence, and he sighed. "We get one of these every summer. Take pictures, file a report. She'll have to move it, but it might take a few weeks." Weeks. I pictured Karen sunbathing by my water in the meantime. So I decided to make use of the time. If she wanted to play land games, I'd play lake games. I called a friend who did surveying for a living, and we pored over the property map. That's when he pointed something out that made my jaw drop. "Look here," he said, tracing a line with his pen. "Your parcel doesn't just touch the lake, it extends into it." "What do you mean?" "You technically own part of the lake bed, about 30 feet out from shore. Old property laws, they drew these parcels decades ago when the water line was lower." I grinned. "So I don't just own the lakefront, I own part of the lake." He nodded. That night, under the fading orange sky, I stood at my property line, eyeing Karen's fence. She was on her deck again, watching me like I might trespass on her newly stolen land. "Evening," she said sweetly. "Lovely night," I replied, hiding a smile. Because in that moment, I wasn't mad anymore. I was inspired. If she wanted to stare at something every morning from her oversized windows, I was going to give her a view she'd never forget. The next day, I called a contractor. "I want a pier built," I told him, "right on my property. Big, beautiful, and very, very visible." He asked for a location. I pointed to the water line directly next to her fence. "There, the perfect spot." When the hammers started a week later, Karen stormed down in her sun hat like a general charging the field. "You can't build that. It's obstructing my view," she snapped. "My pier's on my land," I said calmly, "and a little bit on my lake. You know, the part I own." She blinked, confused. You can't own the lake. I grinned. You'd be surprised what's in the deed. The look on her face was priceless, half disbelief, half dread. For the next few days, she tried everything. Calls to the county. It's legal, they told her. Complaints to the supposed HOA. There isn't one, Dale confirmed. Even a note that said, "This construction violates the natural serenity of Silverpine." I framed that one. By the end of the week, my new pier stood proud. Wide, polished planks, sturdy posts, a comfortable bench at the end where I could drink my coffee and watch the sunrise. Karen's deck, unfortunately for her, faced directly toward it. Every morning she opened her blinds and saw my brand new pier, my private pier, as the hand-carved sign said in big friendly letters. And every evening, as the sun set behind the lake, she saw me sitting there, fishing pole in hand, mug of coffee by my side, completely content. But that was just the beginning. Because as I learned later, her shared view zone wasn't the only thing she'd misunderstood about the property lines, and what happened next turned her fence into the biggest self-own in HOA history. For a blissful week, the new pier turned into my personal stage. I'd sit there in the mornings with coffee, or in the evenings with my fishing rod, and inevitably I'd catch sight of Karen's curtains twitching. Sometimes she'd step onto her deck with her wine glass, pretending to water a plant that didn't exist just so she could glare. I thought maybe she'd tire of the staring contest. Instead, she started her next campaign. One morning, as I was tightening a loose bolt on the pier, a white SUV with the county seal rolled up. Out stepped a man with a clipboard and a weary expression. "Mr. Collins?" he asked. "That's me," I said. He sighed. "We got a complaint about unauthorized waterfront construction. Said something about an illegal dock impeding natural flow." I pointed to my shiny new pier. "Completely permitted. You can check with Dale in the property office." He flipped through his forms, frowned, and nodded slowly. "Says here the permit's legit. Extended shoreline parcel, special allowance from 84. Huh. Rare." He looked almost disappointed that there wasn't a bigger fight. Behind him, Karen stood by her fence, arms crossed, wearing sunglasses even though it was cloudy. "So? What are you going to do about it?" she demanded. The inspector looked at her, then at me, then back at his clipboard. "Ma'am, looks like he's in the clear." Her jaw dropped. "That can't be right." "I'm afraid it is," he said. "Maybe talk to your—" He hesitated, realizing there was no HOA. Talk to your neighbor about boundaries." "I've tried," she snapped. He nodded politely, got back in his SUV, and left her there sputtering. That night, I found another note taped to my mailbox. "Until we resolve this, you are forbidden from using any shared access path. Violations will incur penalties." I wrote back on the same paper. "What penalties?" The owner of the dock. It was around then that my contractor called. "Hey, remember that surveyor you hired? He sent us the extended property map. You should take a look." He emailed it over. I opened it and nearly spit out my drink. Not only did my property extend 30 feet into the lake, it wrapped around in a curve like a crescent moon. The line bent behind Karen S. house and covered a thin strip of water right in front of her deck. Technically, part of her view wasn't hers at all. I stared at the map for a long moment, then laughed so loud my dog started barking. I called Dale the next day. "So," I asked, "if my property line extends behind her dock area—" "You're asking if you can build something there?" he said. "Hypothetically." He chuckled. "As long as it's over your water rights and meets setback codes, sure." I thanked him, hung up, and called my contractor again. "You busy next week?" When the construction truck rolled up 2 mornings later, Karen practically sprinted out. "You can't possibly be building another one," she cried. I grinned. Not a pier this time, a floating platform, just a few chairs. Thought it'd be nice to relax where the sunset hits. "That's my view!" she shrieked. "Funny thing," I said, holding up the county-approved map. "Looks like it's my water." She sputtered. "That's ridiculous." "I thought so too," I said cheerfully. But the deed doesn't lie. By the end of the week, my new floating platform was complete. a small square deck anchored with discrete posts about 20 feet out, directly in front of her deck. Not blocking her view exactly, just reframing it. I furnished it with 2 chairs, a small table, and a sign that read, "Private Mooring, Authorized Access Only." The first evening I used it, I brought a lantern and a portable speaker. Soft jazz floated across the lake while I leaned back, watching the sunset turn the water gold. Karen stood behind her glass doors looking like she might explode. The next morning, she called the sheriff. 2 deputies showed up. Both looked like they'd been through this rodeo before. "Ma'am," one said patiently, "the map says his parcel includes this section." "But he's taunting me," she said. The deputy looked at me. "You taunting her?" I shrugged. "Just listening to music." He nodded. "Seems legal to me." She huffed away, muttering about lawyers. After that, things got quiet. I almost felt bad. Almost. Until the day I received a formal-looking envelope in the mail from Silver Pine Homeowners Association. The letterhead looked suspiciously homemade. "Notice of property reevaluation," it read. "Effective immediately. Any docks or structures extending into shared lake space must be reviewed by the board." I laughed out loud. The board, of course, was just Karen. This time, instead of ignoring her, I replied with something official-looking of my own, a letter from the county's zoning office that stated, in bold type, "Parcel 47B retains sole water rights in its recorded boundaries." I highlighted the part that mentioned my parcel number, copied the entire page, and taped it to the shared mailbox for everyone to see. By sunset, Karen had taken down her fake HOA sign. She didn't wave anymore. Instead, she closed her blinds every morning. I thought that might be the end of it. Then, one morning, I heard hammering, not on my property, on hers. I walked over and found a construction crew installing a new privacy wall on her deck, 10 feet high, completely blocking her lake view. "Big change," I said. She glared. "At least now I don't have to look at that." She waved a hand toward my pier and platform. "Your choice," I said, smiling. What I didn't tell her was that her contractor had accidentally built part of that wall on my side of the property line. And that tiny mistake, those extra 2 feet, would set up the most poetic ending to the whole ridiculous saga. When the wall went up, it looked like a fortress. Tall cedar boards, heavy posts, and zero style. The kind of thing that screamed, "I'm not mad, I'm just emotionally barricading myself." At first, I didn't think much about the placement. She could build whatever eyesore she wanted, as long as it wasn't on my land. But when I was out cleaning the pier a few days later, I noticed the posts lined up a little too close. I pulled out the surveyor's map again. The coordinates didn't lie. That wall of hers sliced 2 feet into my parcel. I could have marched over and demanded she tear it down. But after weeks of drama, I'd learned that direct confrontation was like throwing gasoline on a barbecue. Instead, I took pictures, called Dale, and filed a boundary encroachment report. Quietly. 3 days later, a county truck showed up again. Out stepped a man I hadn't met before, a tall inspector with mirrored sunglasses and a clipboard that looked like it had seen battle. He walked up my dock, nodding at the new pier and floating platform. "You Collins?" "Guilty," I said. "Got a report of unauthorized construction on parcel 47B's perimeter." He tilted his glasses down, smirking. "That would be your neighbor, I assume." I didn't answer, just pointed to the wall. He stepped it off, then took out a measuring tape. When he hit the end, he whistled softly. "She's over the line, all right. 2 feet, 8 inches, that's a clear encroachment." Right on cue, Karen appeared, arms folded, voice sharp enough to slice through the morning air. "Excuse me, what do you think you're doing?" "Ma'am," the inspector said calmly, "this wall's sitting on your neighbor's property." "That's impossible," she snapped. "My contractor measured everything." "Well," he said, tapping the clipboard, "either your contractor's got a crooked eye, or your tape measure's allergic to truth." Her jaw dropped. "You can't talk to me like that." He shrugged. "County code lets us enforce removal if the owner doesn't adjust voluntarily." She glared at me like I'd personally invented the law of measurement. "You did this." "I just own the dirt," I said. The inspector gave her a week to fix it. She stormed off, muttering about harassment. By the weekend, I thought it was over. Then I woke up Sunday to the sound of sawing and shouting. The contractor was back, but instead of taking down the wall they were building around it, they added a return section that curved in toward her own property, boxing off her deck entirely like a wooden cage. When I walked over to the edge of my dock, the foreman wiped sweat off his brow and grinned. "She said to make it taller." "Sure," I said. "Hope she likes staring at wood." 2 days later, I got an email from Dale with a scanned copy of an amended property note. Turns out the county had processed my encroachment claim, and because her wall now technically sat on my land, it was officially recorded as my structure. I nearly fell off my chair laughing. That afternoon, I walked out to the wall, found a clean section, and screwed in a small brass plaque I'd ordered overnight. It read, "Private structure, property of parcel, 47B. Then, just to twist the knife with humor instead of anger, I added a flower box and a small hanging light fixture. The next morning, when Karen opened her curtains, she froze. I waved cheerfully from the pier. She stomped down her steps, fuming. "That's my wall." "Actually," I said, holding up the county paperwork, "it's mine now. Code says any structure built past your boundary defaults to the rightful parcel owner. Congratulations, you've just improved my backyard." Her face went red. You can't do that." "I already did." For the first time since she'd moved in, she didn't have a comeback. She turned around, marched inside, and slammed her door. The next few weeks were bliss. I had my pier, my floating platform, and now, technically, a bonus privacy wall that doubled as a windbreak. My lakeside setup looked like something out of a resort ad, but I wasn't done. There was still one loose thread. Karen's fence, the same one she'd built across my beach months ago, was still standing. The county order said she had to move it, but she'd ignored it, probably hoping I'd forgotten. So, one Friday morning, I rented a small crane and a trailer. I called a local crew and told them I had a relocation project. We unbolted the entire fence, panel by panel, and hauled it around to the back of my property, reinstalling it right at the water's edge, where my parcel line curved near her deck. When the last section went in, it looked perfect. A neat cedar barrier, freshly stained with a shiny new sign. Private lake access, no trespassing. That evening, I sat on the pier as the sun dipped low, the lake like glass. From her deck, Karen's once panoramic view was now boxed in, framed by her own wall and my relocated fence. The only clear patch of lake she could still see was directly occupied by my floating platform. And as fate would have it, that was where I'd planned to host my first ever dock dinner. I sent out a few invites. To Dale from the county, the contractor, my surveyor friend. We grilled burgers, turned on string lights, and played quiet music. Halfway through dinner, Dale raised a beer and grinned. "So this the same lady who tried to fence you out?" "The very one," I said. He laughed. "Man, the paperwork alone on this case is going to be legendary." Karen's blinds stayed closed that night. I thought that might finally be the end of it. But 2 weeks later, I got a surprise envelope from a real law firm, her law firm. Apparently, she was suing me for intentional emotional distress and loss of view. It was a ridiculous claim, until her own evidence file revealed something even the county hadn't noticed yet. And that discovery? That was the twist that made her whole lawsuit collapse like a bad dock in a storm. The letter from the law firm looked serious enough to make me sit down before opening it. Emotional distress, loss of view, and willful obstruction of property enjoyment. All the phrases that sound like trouble until you remember who wrote them. I sighed, took a photo of the envelope for my records, and called Dale. "Hey," I said, "apparently I'm being sued for ruining a view of the lake I technically own." He laughed so loudly I had to hold the phone away. "Bring it by," he said. "Let's see what she's trying this time." At the county office, we spread her complaint across his desk. Each page had a photo, the wall, the fence, my pier, even a zoomed-in shot of the brass plaque I'd mounted. "She's thorough," Dale said. "Look at that numbering system, labels like Exhibit F, fence interference. She really went for it." He flipped to the appendix where she'd attached a copy of her deed and survey. He froze halfway through reading it, then looked up, grinning. Oh, this is rich. What? She attached the wrong parcel map. It's from before the county redrew the floodplain lines 15 years ago. See here? He pointed to a shaded strip. Her property stops 10 feet shorter than she thought. Half the deck she built, where that big wall starts, isn't legally hers. It sits inside the lake buffer zone we manage. I blinked. So the county owns part of her deck? He nodded. Technically, yeah. She's been suing you for obstructing a view across land she doesn't even own. We both sat back and laughed until people from the next office peeked in. Dale said he'd handle the paperwork. Don't gloat, he warned. We'll send her an official notice. It'll be cleaner that way. A week later, a new sign appeared at the end of her driveway. Notice: unpermitted structure under review. By then, the tension between us had cooled into something almost comic. We'd bump into each other at the mailbox, both pretending the other wasn't there, both secretly wondering what the county would do next. Turns out they didn't tear anything down. They offered her a simple choice: register her deck properly as a shared-use structure or move it back inside her line. To everyone's surprise, she chose to register it, which meant agreeing, on paper, that my adjoining lake section remained under my ownership. A month later, she withdrew the lawsuit. No apology, no note, just quiet. Summer rolled in full, and life at the lake slowly returned to normal. The wall stayed up, but now it was covered with the flowers I'd planted, bright red geraniums spilling over the top. Karen even started watering the ones that hung on her side. We didn't speak, but there was a truce of sorts. She kept her music down, and I stopped hosting loud dock dinners. By August, I almost missed the excitement. Almost. One evening, I was sitting on the pier watching the sunset when I heard a hesitant voice behind me. Nice night, Karen said. She was holding a watering can and wearing the look of someone who de-rehearsed the line 3 times. Sure is, I said, shifting over so she could see the horizon. She nodded toward the lake. I didn't realize those property lines were so old-fashioned. They surprise a lot of people, I said lightly. Paperwork from the 70s still rules half this shoreline. She smiled, a little embarrassed. Well, for what it's worth, the flowers look nice. I suppose we both see enough of that wall that it might as well be pretty. It wasn't much, but it was enough. The lake glowed orange and pink between us, and for the first time since we'd been neighbors, the silence felt peaceful instead of tense. A few weeks later, the county finished updating its maps. They sent each of us a new survey packet. I opened mine, saw the crisp new lines, and laughed again. The pier, the floating platform, even the wall were all neatly shaded under Parcel 47B. The county had labeled my pier as a recreational structure private, and almost poetically, marked the small slice of water in front of her deck as shared view easement. It meant we were officially linked, 2 homeowners sharing one lake and one long story neither of us would ever forget. That weekend, I built one more thing, a small wooden sign at the start of my dock, simple white letters burned into the grain. Silver Pine, private pier neighbors welcome, if they ask first. Karen saw it a few days later and gave a single reluctant nod from her deck. Not quite an apology, not quite forgiveness, but a kind of peace offering only stubborn neighbors can understand. By the end of the summer, her husband finally came home from one of his mysterious trips. The first morning he walked out onto their deck, he looked around and said, "Honey, you've got a great view of that pier." From where I sat on the end of it, mug of coffee in hand, I couldn't help but grin. The lake was calm again, mine, hers, and just the way it should be.